Name's Ruthie Barger. I'm a real alcoholic. Tonight we're on page 151, A Vision for You, chapter 11. And this is the last chapter of the big book. Of the, what's important in the big book. I shouldn't say that now. And there's 11 chapters in the big book, and this is the last one, okay? Let's put it like that. So, a vision for you. There's a lot of history in this chapter. And we're going to start out talking about that we're happy when we're free. And we're going to talk about how that we keep on looking for that one more giggle, that we're going to go out and we'll have one more giggle, one more good time. And it don't ever happen. And this is where we have to be reminded about once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. We as alcoholics are like cucumbers. And there's all kind of things you can do with cucumbers. But once, excuse me. Once we turn that cucumber into a pickle, that cucumber going to be a pickle for the rest of its life. Can never go back to being a cucumber. So this is what our big book's going to be telling us. So here we are, page 151, A Vision for You. Let's see what the book has to say.
A vision for you. For most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. But not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures were gone. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding companionship and approval. Momentarily we did. Then would come oblivion, and the awful awakening to face the hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair.
And these guys make very, very poor bedfellows. Terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. And that's who we woke up with every morning, every morning, every morning.
Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. Now and then, a serious drinker, being dry at the moment, says, "I don't miss it at all."
This is talking about the dry alcoholic, not the recovered alcoholic. Different things.
Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end.
I think now this book was written 1938. And let me tell you that today suicide is the second cause of death for young people in the United States. Suicide, the jumping off spot. And it's very interesting to know that alcoholics usually commit suicide sober. That these aren't accidents. We get to that point of being sober, and that thought, I was a failure as a drunk. I'm a failure at being sober. Maybe I should just cash it in. And so many alcoholics act on that. The reason for a sponsor, the reason for mental health, the reason for a home group, the reason for fellowship. We need these things in our life. When we start isolating, that is a sign of failure. We have to stay in these rooms, even if you don't like it. Some of you are sentenced here. Some of us get sober because we're paper trained. Those papers back there. Maybe that's how you got sober. But let me tell you what, you're going to stay sober by keeping coming back. We need the fellowship. And the old farts that are around need you just as much as you need us. Honey, this is the home of the black sheep. And we got to stay here. And we got to keep coming back. Okay?
We have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I'm willing. But am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum, like some righteous people I see? I know I must get along without liquor. But how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous.
You are going to see all kinds of promises in this chapter. I'm not going to point all of them out to you. But when this book makes a point-blank statement, trust and believe that it is a promise. Okay? And there's a whole bunch of them in this chapter. And here comes one right now.
Release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You are going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly like people in a sinking ship. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds, high and low, rich and poor. These are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Another promise.
Among them, you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together, and you will commence, shoulder to shoulder, your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself.
I had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous to learn the true meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. You know, when I first got sober, if I'd have done to my neighbors the things I did to myself, they throw you in jail for shit like that. You ain't allowed to do that to another human being. That's against the law. And here I was taught how to love me. And when I learned how to love me, I was then able and capable of loving my neighbor.
It may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. How can they rise out of such misery, bad repute, and hopelessness? The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Should you wish them above all else, and be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that. Our hope is that when this ship of a book is launched on the world tide of alcoholism, defeated drinkers will seize upon it to follow its suggestions. Many, we are sure, will rise to their feet and march on. They will approach still other sick ones, and fellowships of Alcoholics Anonymous may spring up in each city and hamlet, havens for those who must find a way out. In the chapter Working with Others, you gathered an idea of how we approach and aid others to health. Suppose now that through you, several families have adopted this way of life. You will want to know more of how to proceed from that point. Perhaps the best way of treating you to a glimpse of your future will be to describe the growth of the fellowship among us. Here is a brief account.
Now, we are going to get some history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and whether you know it or not, this is the cradle of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right here is where Alcoholics Anonymous was born, 30 miles from here. This is where AA was born. And if you travel, and I'm talking going 100 miles, and you tell somebody that you live 30 miles from Akron, Ohio, they think you should walk a little bit off the ground because they think that this is the Mecca. And we should know the history. And we are going to get just a brief glance, but a history lesson with the big book. We're going to talk about Bill Wilson. We're going to talk about a western city. And that western city he's talking about is Akron, Ohio. Now, I don't know how you get west out of Akron, Ohio, but he was from Vermont, so I guess that was really far west.
Years ago, in 1935, one of our number made a journey to a certain western city. From a business standpoint, his trip came off badly. Had he been successful in his enterprise, he would have been set on his feet financially, which at the time seemed vitally important. But his venture wound up in a lawsuit and bogged down completely. The proceeding was shot through with much hard feeling and controversy. Bitterly discouraged, he found himself in a strange place, discredited and almost broke. Still physically weak and sober but a few months, he saw that his predicament was dangerous. He wanted so much to talk with someone. But whom?
Now, what had happened is Bill Wilson and some of his cronies had come to Akron, Ohio to take over a company entitled the National Rubber Machinery Corporation in Akron. And Bill was going to be the CEO. He was going to be the big shot. Well, as it said, the business went bad. Bill didn't even have enough money to pay for his way to go home. So everybody left, and he had to spend the weekend at the Mayflower Hotel. The Mayflower Hotel is still in Akron, Ohio, but I believe that it is now it's housing for like mentally retarded individuals. It's like government housing. And we used to be able to go in there because they put up a payphone and they had Bill and Bob's last speech there. And the beautiful chandelier and the beautiful brass stairways that went up there. I mean, this was a high-class place. And as a matter of fact, it was in the Mayflower Hotel that we had, Alcoholics Anonymous had its first world convention in 1950. But this is where they're at. Bill's there at the hotel, can't get home, don't have any money. He's pacing the lobby, and there's a bar in the lobby, the Paradise Inn. And he get over by the Paradise Inn, and he's hearing the twinkling of the bottles, and he's hearing the life of, the laughing and the giggling and the tinkling of the glasses. And then he go back to the church directory, and he's looking over there, and then he go back to the bar, and he's listening to what all's going on. And he's just driving himself crazy. So finally he gets a handful of nickels. And he goes to the payphones. And he starts making some phone calls. And it's always the last phone call you make, right? Last phone call he makes, he gets a hold of a guy. And he's not in the Oxford group. He starts out all of them like this. My name's Bill W. I'm a rum hound from New York, and I'm looking for some meetings of the Oxford group. And this is what he's looking for. Because the Oxford group was a religion that welcomed religious outcast. If you was a Baptist that wanted to wear makeup, if you was a Methodist that wanted to dance, if you was a Presbyterian that wanted to go to the movies, if you was a Catholic that got a divorce, whatever that would go against church doctrine, you were welcome in the Oxford group. What the Oxford group wanted to do is get back to first century Christianity. And that was the study of the written word, the Holy Bible, with the elimination of church doctrine. And that's where these thou shalt not smoke and thou shalt not dance and thou shalt not wear makeup and all of that's where all that stuff comes from, is church doctrine. Well, the Oxford group wanted to eliminate that. So they welcomed into the rooms. Let me tell you a little bit about the Oxford group. Number one, they wanted wealthy people there. They sought out people that they wanted, and they wanted wealthy people. They wanted people that was going to be anonymous, where you could go to the Oxford group and you don't have to worry about anybody telling on you being there. The Oxford group like I said, it wasn't like you go to the Oxford group and you tell them, hey, I'm Ruth Barger and I want to go to your meeting. And I said, no Oxford group meeting going on here. They did not own anything. They had what they called house parties. We'd have a meeting at my house this week. And Wednesday, we have a meeting at Spence's. And then we'd have a meeting over here at John's. And then we'd have a meeting at Cookies. And whoever was in the group, they'd open up their homes to these group. And the people that were members would know where it was at. Now, you could be brought to these meetings. Well, it got to where the alcoholics were welcome at these meetings. They were so welcome that these people that opened up their homes allowed the alcoholics to come in early, and they would stay for the meeting, and if they wanted to, they could stay late. And they actually acquired a name. They were called the Drunk Squad of the Oxford group. Okay? Well, as time went on, the Drunk Squad started getting rejected by the rejects. Yeah, they got to where they didn't want us at their meetings. And it was time for us to break away from the Oxford group. The first groups to break away was the ones that was in New York. The second ones to break away was the ones in Cleveland. And the last ones to break away are the ones in Akron. So many things that went on at the Oxford group you can still see going on. So many people talk about the four absolutes. That does not belong to Alcoholics Anonymous. That belongs to the Oxford group. We use it. Don't get too hungry, angry, or
honesty, purity, unselfishness,
unselfishness and love, yeah. There you go. The absolutes. Those are good, but they do not belong to the Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, if you go to a meeting in Cleveland, you are going to see anybody from Cleveland going to have a tie on when they go behind that podium because you're supposed to be dressed up. You're going to hear them give their sobriety date. And they are going to tell you that with God and the four absolutes that they've stayed sober forever, how long it's been. That's Cleveland AA. Not that that's wrong. I still think people should dress up when you're at the podium. You know, when you're behind that podium, you ain't representing you. You're representing Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is a program of attraction, not promotion. And you should show people that you got sober and you learned how to take a bath and you learned how to dress up and you learned how to comb your hair and you learned how to start taking care of yourself. You know, that's one of them things that belongs behind that podium. A program of attraction. I like to see that. Sometimes I go to meetings, I see people behind that podium, and they're telling me that they're sober, they're clean and sober, X amount of years. The only way I know that's because they're telling me. They're still MF and everything. They're still, dressing like the streets. They're still acting streety. Nothing there showing me anything about recovery. We learn how to act in these rooms. And if you ain't being taught how to act, you better get yourself another sponsor. Because that's part of the job of a sponsor. That teach you some manners, that teach you how to act. Some of us we don't know how to act because we didn't have no kind of upbringing at home. Alcoholism, drug addiction being passed on generations and generations. We didn't have it at home. So it ain't our fault we don't know nothing. But I'll tell you what, if you're still acting like that in these rooms, and you've been here a couple years, it's your sponsor's fault. Because they should be grabbing you by the ear and saying, okay, this is the way you do things. I'm preaching. Come on, let's... Okay, let's get into the book.
One dismal afternoon, he paced a hotel lobby, wondering how his bill was to be paid. At one end of the room stood a glass-covered directory of local churches. Down the lobby, a door opened into an attractive bar. He could see the gay crowd inside. In there, he would find companionship and release. Unless he took some drinks, he might not have the courage to scrape an acquaintance and would have a lonely weekend. Of course, he couldn't drink. But why not sit hopefully at a table, a bottle of ginger ale before him? After all, had he not been sober 6 months now? Perhaps he could handle, say, 3 drinks, no more. Fear gripped him. He was on thin ice. Again, it was the old insidious insanity, that first drink. With a shiver, he turned away and walked down the lobby to the church directory. Music and gay chatter still floated to him from the bar. But what about his responsibilities, his family, and the men who would die because they would not know how to get well? Yes, those other alcoholics. There must be many such in this town. He would phone a clergyman. His sanity returned, and he thanked God. Selecting a church at random from the directory, he stepped into a booth and lifted the receiver. His call to the clergyman led him presently to a certain resident of the town, who, though formerly able and respected, was then nearing the nadir of alcoholic despair. It was the usual situation: home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears, and standing damaged.
This was in reference to Dr. Bob. We own Dr. Bob's home. We can go up there any day of the week, with the exception of Christmas, from 12 to 3, and go into that home, and there are people that go up there and tell you about the home and about the history. The clergyman that Bill got a hold of was Dr. Walter Tunks. Walter Tunks was not a member of the Oxford group, but he did know a woman who was, and her name was Henrietta Seiberling. Henrietta Seiberling was the divorced wife of the family that lived in Stan Hewitt Hall. And Henrietta was divorced, and her 2 children were living in the gatehouse. And when she got divorced from Harry Seiberling, there was a deal made that Henrietta and her children could live in the gatehouse as long as they lived. Little did they know that Dorothy, the daughter of Henrietta Seiberling, lived to be 108. And it was just recently, say in the last 20 years maybe, that the house was turned over and went up for sale, and Glen Bay, I believe, bought it. So, but the house, the gatehouse is where Bill and Bob met. The preacher told Dr. Bill Wilson, they turned him on to Dr. Bob because Anne and Henrietta went to the Oxford group together. And Dr. Bob went to the meeting and had just confessed the week before that, I know none of you know this, but I am a closet alcoholic. Everybody knew it, but he thought he had been being very good at keeping it a secret. But so this resident of the town that Bill met up with was Dr. Bob. Now they go to Henrietta's house, and Dr. Bob was really hungover. He'd been out on a toot for an entire weekend over Mother's Day. And he told his wife, he says, I'm going to give this joker 15 minutes, and that's it. So he went with his wife to the gatehouse to meet Bill Wilson. And so they went back into the library, and Henrietta brought some coffee to them. And Bill started giving him his spiel. And Dr. Bob listened. And he says, this is the first time I've heard anyone talk about alcoholism that knows what the hell they're talking about. This guy has walked a mile in my moccasins. He is an alcoholic. He knows what the hell he's talking about. He speaks my language. Those were the words. He speaks my language. And from then on, two men that were entirely different, tall, lanky men, one young, one old, personalities, one a soapboxer, he wants to talk. I mean, he could sell snowballs to all right, or whatever they. and then Dr. Bob, he's real quiet, conserved, very short sentences, packed with a lot of meaning. Two entirely different men get together, become the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous, and never once did they have an argument. And with that, I think we are going to stop. Okay? So next week we are going to get back and finish up okay, right here is where we go. Okay? So with no more from me, I'm going to turn it over to chairperson Spencer.